CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Israel continues its aerial bombardment of Gaza, telling more than 1 million Palestinians, including many in hospitals, that they have hours to move south. Another powerful earthquake strikes western Afghanistan, just days after 2 tremors killed more than 1,000 people. It's election day in Poland, where the ruling Law and Justice Party is hoping to see off opposition, led by the former EU chief Donald Tusk. And world leaders are arriving in Beijing to attend the 3rd Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation next week. Israel is continuing to launch air attacks on Gaza, warning more than 1 million Palestinians to evacuate south, including hospital patients and medical staff. The World Health Organization says moving the sick and injured from Gaza's hospitals would be a death sentence. Israel says it hit over 100 military targets in Gaza and claims to have killed a senior Hamas commander responsible for a deadly attack on an Israeli kibbutz. It's also imposed a 4-kilometre buffer zone on its northern border with Lebanon after a missile strike left 1 Israeli dead. Well, let's speak now to our correspondent Noor Harazin, who is in Gaza for us. Noor, we can see the body bags behind you outside that hospital. How are the hospitals there coping amid energy shortages?
Well, it is a catastrophic situation here in the hospitals. I am inside Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is located in Deir al-Balah in southern Gaza. And as you can see behind me, the body bags of tens of Palestinians that were killed today during Israeli strikes on different areas around the southern Gaza. And southern Gaza is basically where the Israeli army asked the Palestinians to evacuate from northern Gaza and central Gaza City too. And since this morning, we have been witnessing injuries, people killed, and the body bags behind me are from people that were killed today. They are from Ghabayan family. It's basically a whole family. The home was destroyed while the people were inside the home. We're talking about men, women, and also several children from a Ghabayan family.
Incredibly distressing situation. What about people moving south? Is there any sign that people are leaving the northern part of Gaza as Israel has ordered, or are people staying put?
Well, there is a number of people who've decided to stay in their homes in northern Gaza and also in central Gaza City because they do believe that this is the second Palestinian Nakba. Well, they might leave their homes and not come back and became basically Palestinian refugees, while there is also a very big number, hundreds of thousands of people who already left their homes and they are taking shelter in some hospitals and schools and maybe relatives' homes here in southern Gaza and different cities in southern Gaza like Deir al-Balah, Nusayrat, Khan Yunis, Rafah. These are all cities are located in southern Gaza. However, people now realize that basically nowhere is safe in Gaza because there is an ongoing Israeli attacks and airstrikes in northern Gaza and central Gaza City and also in southern Gaza.
Noor Harazin reporting live from Gaza. Do take care. Many thanks for that update. Well, let's get the latest now from Israel and our correspondent Stephanie Fried, who is in the city of Sderot in southern Israel. It looks pretty deserted behind you, Stephanie. What's the situation there now?
Deserted, that's exactly right. This town was evacuated a few hours ago, about the same time that Israel issued a recommendation for Gazans to move south and to get out of Gaza City and move south, and they put up maps and dropped leaflets with maps to give people a corridor, show them which route to take to get south. They evacuated this town. As well, they've evacuated areas of the north. So now you've got, there are hot, let's say, openings on both fronts. A lot of action back and forth, but right here for right now, I mean, I can tell you that I'm hearing the barrages, I'm hearing the hits on Gaza from where I stand. And the jet movement has been flying overhead continuously. I'm hearing a lot of artillery as well overhead, the drones, constant. We have had incoming rockets having to run for cover just now within the past few minutes. There was a barrage of apparently rockets reportedly fired on the central area and Tel Aviv. There is a fear of an escalation. I talked about the northern front. Antony Blinken was in Israel a few days ago. He's coming back. And the reason is, we understand, to try and negotiate secure exit for foreign nationals, around 1,000 in Gaza, including 300 Americans. Again, talking about the northern front, there has been an escalation there as well between Hezbollah and Israel. One Israeli apparently killed today on the northern border, anti-tank missile fired. Israel then fired with helicopter gunships on points. That buffer zone that you talked about in the north has been created. People have been evacuated, residents of the north out. Reservists have gone up. And there's a buffer zone to buffer against infiltration. And we've seen drone swarms that have come in from Lebanon, rockets, mortars fired. So that's part of the reason that that's there. Talking about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Israel says today on Sunday that it restored water. Hamas says no, Israel did not. So there's a conflict there of whose word is the word against another word.
And there's been a cabinet meeting ongoing in Israel with this new emergency national unity government. Have we had any words out of that, any sign perhaps of when this ground offensive into Gaza might happen?
I mean, all the signs, Paul, are there. All the signs, the troops, the movement, the hardware, it's all right there. And Israel has said as much, basically, that their end game here is to annihilate Hamas. And that's what they're going to go in to do. The idea here is they want to conduct a campaign, and when they're finished, Hamas will also be finished, according to the Israel's government. We just don't have a time frame for that yet. And again, I'm saying that the front in the north, that's precarious. The concern that Iran could get involved. Hezbollah in Lebanon is backed by Iran. Israel's defense minister, he has said that Israel has no interest in getting into and engaging with Hezbollah in the north. However, again, reservists have moved there. There are the components in place in case, and the buffer zone, as I said, was created. So that's also another front that remains in question.
Stephanie, thank you so much. Stephanie Fried, do be safe, reporting from Sderot in southern Israel. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, even if the Israeli offensive appears to perhaps temporarily be on hold, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that troops will definitely enter Gaza soon. Well, let's get some more analysis on how this could turn out. Joining me now is Colin Clark, who's Director of Policy and Research at the Souphone Group of Consultancy and a specialist on international security and terrorism. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on CGTN. What do you think the first stage of a ground offensive could look like, and what's your best guess as when we might see that?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It could be any day now. It definitely feels imminent with the massing at the border. There's already been reports that the IDF is conducting very kind of sporadic sweeps with small numbers of soldiers. I think at this point, we're looking at what we would call an intelligence preparation of the battlefield. The Israelis are looking to seek intelligence on the hostages, the location of those hostages, and then also try to map out the network of subterranean tunnels that Hamas has constructed over the past several years. That's going to be a key component of urban warfare in this next phase if the Israelis do, in fact, go forth with a full-on ground invasion.
So you talk about urban warfare. How dangerous is that? You talked about these reinforced tunnels that Hamas uses. Even with its huge advantage in terms of numbers of soldiers, how difficult and dangerous will it be for the Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza, and how can they plan for that?
It's going to be incredibly dangerous. The Israelis have done it before. If you think back to Operation Cast Lead, 2008, 2009. So they've got a lot of experience fighting in Gaza. But to me, Hamas is a different enemy in 2023. Clearly, their operational capabilities have improved significantly with Iranian assistance, training, equipment. And I think you're going to see a combination of what I would call old school and new school warfare. Old school, it may very well look like block-to-block fighting in Grozny and Chechnya during the 1990s. However, it will have that additional element of drones and other emerging technologies that both sides will bring to bear. So incredibly dangerous phase coming up next. Hamas will rely on asymmetric tactics, including improvised explosive devices, rocket-propelled grenades, snipers, ambushes. And so even for the IDF, which is a world-class military, Hamas will prove to be a formidable foe, especially in this terrain.
And the United Nations has told Israel that it must observe the rules of war. President Biden this week saying that democracies like Israel are stronger and more secure when they act according to the rule of law. Has the IDF been doing so in this offensive on Gaza so far?
Yeah, I think it's still too early to kind of do a battle damage assessment. You know, there's so much mis and disinformation that's leaking out. We've seen stories that have been pulled back and withdrawn and retracted, and so I'm not yet ready to make a comment on how the IDF has performed in terms of civilian casualties and collateral damage. But again, a very, very difficult challenge, even for a nation with Israel, even for a nation like Israel that has, you know, all of the latest and most innovative weapons, precision-guided munitions, and the like. It's just dense urban terrain. They're fighting amidst rubble with human shields. Really, definitely a hornet's nest that they're about to walk into.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there, but really great to get your insights today. Colin Clark, Director of Policy and Research at the Sufan Group. Many thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Well, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says the top priority is to cool the situation between Israel and Gaza and prevent a serious humanitarian disaster. In a phone call with his Iranian counterpart, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, Wang said that China supports Islamic countries in strengthening unity on the Palestinian issue. Abdullahian called for action to prevent attacks on civilians in Gaza and said that Iran hopes to resolve the issue through political means. While China's special envoy to the Middle East has told CGTN that Beijing is prepared to work with all relevant parties to promote peace talks between Israel and the Palestinian armed group Hamas.
The root cause of the Palestinian issue lies in the fact that Palestine's long-cherished wish to establish an independent state has not been realized. The way out lies in the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, which means implementing the two-state solution and realizing peaceful coexistence between Palestine and Israel. Since the current round of Palestinian-Israeli conflicts, China has been communicating and coordinating with relevant parties. The relevant parties hope to promote a ceasefire and an end to violence, condemn actions that harm civilians, call for the avoidance of humanitarian disasters, and look forward to resuming the Middle East peace process. Next week, I will visit the relevant countries in the Middle East to further strengthen coordination with all parties. The direction of our work is to cease fire, protect civilians, ease the situation, and promote peace talks.
Well, we will return to this story a bit later in the bulletin, but another top story that we're covering for you, a new earthquake has hit western Afghanistan just days after two large tremors in the region killed more than 1,000 people. Sunday's magnitude 6.5 quake struck at a depth of 10 kilometres. Officials in Herat say at least one person was killed. Entire villages in the western province have been destroyed. Well, let's get more on the latest earthquake to hit Afghanistan, the country's third in a week. CGTN Zamaralai Abasin reports.
Alif is the only survivor of a family of 7. He has lost 3 of his daughters, 2 his sons, and his wife, while he was living in Iran, and he has just arrived, and now living alone in this tent. Alif lived in Iran for years and was working hard to feed his family in Zindajan, the epicenter of recent earthquake in western Herat province. He says soon after he saw the news about the earthquake in his village, he returned home. But his entire family lay dead under the debris. The dead bodies of Alif's wife and 5 children had already been sent to the provincial military hospital. He was able to identify 2 of his daughters, but hasn't seen the bodies of his other children and wife. His youngest child was only 2 years old. This is his house, which is totally destroyed, with the entire family of 6.
When I got back home, I didn't see any of my loved ones, only this clothes. These are the trousers of my loved one, my sweetheart. This is what was left behind, and I was left alone with just my God.
He said he spent most of his time in his graveyard, which is now extended with the graves of his family members and dozens of others.
I may find somewhere to live, or I will start living with my brother. But if that doesn't work, I would just living life as a solitary survivor.
Alif's brother, Khairullah, also lost his 2 sons and is now living in a tent with his family of 5. Siaab has been the epicenter of the recent deadly earthquake in Zindajan district of Herat province. There are dozens of other families like Alif's who have entirely lost their lives during the earthquake. Zmaryala Bossin, CGTN, Herat province.
You're watching The World Today. Still ahead. A high-stakes parliamentary election is underway in Poland. We'll be live in Warsaw next.
We're stepping out of the studio to take you on a brand new journey along the Belt and Road.
With a mission to record how the initiative has changed lives and livelihoods.
We travel to over 20 countries.
Приведем репортажи из Алматы, Казахстан, от Дубай, aux Émirats Arabes Unis, desde Las calles de Rio de Janeiro, للمشاريع في Dhaka, Bangladesh. We document not only infrastructure along the Belt and Road countries, but also cultural links that bound the community with a shared future. Stories of how they promote growth and improve lives.
We invite you
only on our special series of the New Silk Road.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Israel continues its aerial bombardment of Gaza, telling more than 1 million Palestinians, including many in hospitals, that they have hours to move south. Meanwhile, there have been clashes between police and pro-Palestinian demonstrators in London, Paris and Berlin over the weekend. Pro-Israeli protests have also been held in some countries, with a vigil for Israeli victims of the Hamas attack currently happening here in London. CGTN's Ken Brown, though, joins us from the Spanish capital, Madrid, where the latest rally in support of Palestinians is taking place. Ken, another pro-Palestine rally planned there today. What can be expected? It's looking a bit busier behind you now.
Yes, we're here live in the center of Madrid where a pro-Palestinian rally is taking place. Sami Doon is the organization that put this together. They are a Palestinian solidarity group. Thousands of people expressing their support for Palestine and their concern that this impending ground assault is going to turn into a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's a heavy police presence here, significant police movement. We've seen police have spoken to us earlier and said that they will intervene if they hear any anti-Semitic chants or protest signs. We haven't seen that yet. No violence here in Madrid, but we have seen violence in other places in Europe. In London yesterday, 15 people arrested after bottles and flares were thrown at police. Also disturbances in Berlin. In Paris on Friday, the police had to disperse a pro-Palestinian rally with water cannons and tear gas. like I mentioned, no sign of that yet. Still very peaceful here in Madrid. Now, of course, in Europe isn't the only places we're seeing rallies like this, both in favor of Israel and Palestine. Tokyo, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, the United States, Istanbul, all across the world, people are expressing their views on this conflict. We spoke to some people here in Madrid who expressed their opinions, again, on both sides of this conflict and this issue. Here's what they said.
Palestine has been suffering systematic attacks from Israel, so at some point they needed to defend or avenge for what Israel does.
I don't agree with the Hamas attack. Many innocent people were killed. Regardless of which side you support, these kind of attacks should never happen.
Well, Jewish communities in France, in London, in Paris, also taking to the streets with demonstrations. We saw in London just today a vigil being held for Israeli victims on the Sabbath. Many of the Jewish community in Paris gathered at the biggest synagogue in the French capital. In Warsaw, the chief rabbi of Poland, Michael Szudrik, he held a multi-confessional prayer for peace. Now, Germany has joined France in banning pro-Palestinian rallies. Many of those continue to take place, and there is some concern that there could be violence that emerges from this. Jewish schools have been closed in the Netherlands, 2 more in London, for example. This is a war and a human tragedy echoing around the world, Paul.
Ken, thank you for that. Ken Brown reporting from Madrid. In other news today, voting is underway in Poland's parliamentary election. The ruling Law and Justice Party is aiming to win an unprecedented 3rd term in office, having been in government since 2015. Former Prime Minister and European Council President Donald Tusk leads the main opposition party. Well, our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic is in Warsaw. What's at stake for voters in this election, Alyosha?
Well, Paul, as voters told us in a couple of voting stations when we spoke to them earlier this morning, they consider these elections not to be ordinary elections, but to be a referendum about the future of Poland. Because on the table, there are 2 completely opposite prospects for Poland, completely opposite options for Poland's future. On one hand, it is a current ruling party, PiS, or Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, which means Law and Justice Party led by Jarosław Kaczyński. They are advocating for more independence of the country, with less ties with EU. They are advocating against immigration laws. They are advocating against sending any more weapons to Ukraine, supporting Ukraine by weapons. That's what they are promoting. On the other side, it is Donald Tusk, as you mentioned. He advocates more ties with EU, closer ties to EU, very, very strong support or continuing unconditional support to Ukraine, and of course more civil rights and civil liberties. Those 2 are absolutely opposing parties, and according to the opinion polls, PiS has an upper hand at this moment, while the coalition led by Donald Tusk is trailing back for some 4 or 5%. But the thing is that because of the intricacies of the Polish election system, it is very hard to determine who will actually be the winner at the end. They will have to wait the full count of all the votes, and only then, when they know how many seats are taken to the parliament by certain party, they will know which coalition would be made, because none of those 2 big parties cannot make a government single-handedly.
Alyosha Milenkovic from Warsaw, many thanks. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has arrived in Beijing to attend the 3rd Belt and Road Forum next week. Hungary was the first European country to sign a cooperation document with China under the Belt and Road, which is China's global infrastructure development strategy. The Hungary-Serbia Railway, under construction, is one of the initiative's flagship projects here in Europe. And Dr. Jeff Raby is a former Australian ambassador to China. He told Robin Dwyer that the current geopolitical turmoil could strengthen the Belt and Road Initiative.
Well, I've written about this on a number of occasions. I think it's very significant because what it did it articulated a framework for foreign and trade policy for China that was quite coherent, and that it was built around, first of all, trade flows and transport routes, but then secondly, investment, infrastructure investment, and so on. And I've said this before, it was always going to overpromise and underdeliver, but that's the way of life with these sorts of big public policy announcements. But as you say, here we are 10 years later, it's still very much central to Chinese foreign and trade policy and overseas investment policy. It has a great reach, both in terms of the number of countries involved and in terms of the geography that it embraces. And it's a very important part of the current international system.
Lots has, of course, changed since the launch of this project, not least the financial climate we're currently in. What impact will that have on the scale and the ambition of those projects originally planned?
Well, I think the whole BRI has been evolving. When it was first announced, there was a great deal of fanfare. I think the reality is not many people really understood what it all meant. And it's been going through subsequent revision and change. Obviously, in the early years, there was a lot of haste. A lot of things were happening which probably hadn't been thought through as thoroughly as they might. I think there's been a period in the middle of reflection and review and reassessment. And I think what we're seeing now is a much more balanced program, and one which doesn't emphasise direct capital flows and major infrastructure projects as much as it used to. Clearly, with China's own pressures, with adjustment in the housing sector and so on, there's much less capital available to put into some of these projects. But it's really not the volume, it's much more the quality, and I think that's where the Belt and Road is heading now, into a better design, better thought through, and higher quality projects.
We've also seen a shift geopolitically, haven't we? Is that going to be a challenge for the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, I think it may even reinforce the importance of the BRI. I mean, quite clearly, many countries do not want to be put in the position where they have to choose between the US or China, or the West and China. And so the BRI, I think, offers many countries alternative forms of investment that otherwise may not have been available.
Dr. Jeff Raby there. Finally, the Shanghai International Arts Festival has kicked off with an open-air concert. German conductor Christoph Eschenbach led a newly established Chinese orchestra at the Shanghai Exhibition Centre. More than 3,000 people attended the event. The festival runs until November the 15th, featuring more than 400 performances. And the headlines again here on CGTN. Israel continues its aerial bombardment of Gaza, telling more than 1 million Palestinians, including many in hospitals, that they have just hours to move south. Another powerful earthquake strikes western Afghanistan, just days after 2 tremors killed more than 1,000 people. And voting is underway in Poland, where the ruling Law and Justice Party is hoping to see off opposition, led by former EU chief Donald Tusk. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news at the top of this hour. Up next, it's Razor. For now, though, from all the team in London, goodbye.